Hey, who's posing as He-Man? Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins Faker. Modernizing and celebrating the original 80s Master Universe action figures, Master Universe Origins gives you the power to pose Eternia's greatest warriors as retro-style figures or the new action-packed battle positions. Before we get a feel for Faker, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. Did you know Faker, by the way, originated from Smurf Village? I had no idea either. Anyways, we're going to take the tape measure right to the very top of his head. That was a really stupid joke. I admit that. Right to the very top of his head, like I said. We're going to stop it right there. According to the readouts, Faker, not from Smurf Village, stands 5.9 inches in height. Let's switch that quickly over to centimeters, revealing that Faker is 15.1 centimeters tall. Sorry, I couldn't help it. He looks like a Smurf. Let's do some comparisons now. The more obvious comparison I'm sure you guys will want to see is what he looks like next to He-Man. One big problem I have with Faker, you probably can see it already. He's, of course, supposed to be posing like He-Man. There's no chance in that happening because he's got blue skin, and his armor's a little bit different. And the big thing, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that's what he looks like next to He-Man. We can also bring in his boss, Skeletor. Skeletor likes to meet at least his quota of appearances in these reviews. So far, so good. And we can bring in a couple of other his cronies. There he is next to Merman. Triclops. Bring in Evil Lyn. Just as a different sized body to compare it next to him. Let's get her feet straightened out. Yeah, you know, I would say certainly looking at the color of Faker, he blends in better, of course, with the bad guys. Not so much with the good guys. But again, if you want yourself a somewhat imposter He-Man, somewhat, Faker certainly does the job almost. More on that almost in a moment. But first, let's have a look at the accessories that come included with Faker. He gets himself a comic, which unfortunately has seen better days. There's a big long crease that runs up the bottom of it. But at least it's not ripped. Well, it is. It's just a little bit on the back there. At least I'm going to have more of these figures that we're going to be looking at as I flip this around to the back. And you can see the other characters that make up this wave. Like Fisto, like a darker Evil Lyn, a Merman with a different head sculpt, and the Faker that we're having a look at in this review. So there are other opportunities available for me to find myself a better looking comic and keep that in my collection. And give the other comic books to the kids in the neighborhood that have been knocking on my door lately. Got any more of those mini comics? In a second, I say. I have to finish reviewing these first. Anyways, though, on the front, this one's called Sucker Punch. No, not that movie, Sucker Punch. But you can see at the top there, that's clearly not He-Man, because why would He-Man be picking up a big giant stick like this to club Fisto? Now, this is certainly one of the lures of comic covers, the idea that you see a comic cover like this in a store and you say, hey, wait a minute, this is an interesting looking cover. How could He-Man be doing such a thing? And then you spend these $7 or $8 to buy. Is that what comic books go for now? Like $12, $15, $25. The cost of a steak meal, you're basically going to have to spend the same on a new issue of a comic book. Anyways, though, what I am getting at, after all that dribbling, is at least on the inside, it would tell you what's happening on the outside. Mind you, the inside, being that this is international packaging, means that unfortunately I have no dialogue anywhere. I don't really even know what's going on. I'm just going to have to use my imagination. Fisto looks like he's in trouble. Fisto looks like he's going to have to contend with... Is that the Land Shark? A vehicle that's currently available right now in retail stores. I'm looking forward to picking that up. But that's not He-Man. Why would He-Man be driving around a vehicle like that? That's Skeletor's ride. Well, again, I'd have to use my imagination to deduce what's going on inside of the comic. So we'll have to put this as a to be continued for the time being. Faker comes also included with an instruction guide. Not necessarily to tell you that he's an imposter or that he's a robot, but more so to tell you that you can remove the limbs, and you can remove the head, and you can remove the lower half, and you can remove the feet. Thank goodness we have no more other things to point out on this instruction guide, so you don't have to hear me popping with my mouth. I never hold on to these. I just simply put them in the recycling bin, unless somebody wants them. I don't know. Let me know. Give me a ring-a-ling. Let me know down below in the comment section. He comes also included with a sword. Okay, so that's some positive things to talk about. He comes included with a power sword, or at least a makeshift version of it. But you can see, at least in this case, similar to the Prince Adam that we saw before, he comes with a two-sided sword. I appreciate that, but it only serves as more of a reminder of the fact that neither of the He-Man that we've gotten so far have come included with a full intact power sword. You've always, of course, gotten halved treatment. We are supposed to be getting still a He-Man and a Skeletor reissue that's going to sport classic head sculpts, and I believe they are going to be giving us full swords. If you technically already have yourself the power battle armor He-Man, then the alternate classic head sculpt is with that anyways. So really, if you're only going to be buying the reissues, you're only really buying them for the reissued swords. And as ridiculous as that is for me to make joke of it, I'm going to totally buy myself it just so I can get myself finally a full-side, double-sided power sword. You can fit it into his hands, but I'm sure you can probably guess. Takes no Sherlock to figure out which hand is going to be holding the sword. Yes, it's this one. Somebody's like, you didn't give me enough time. Sorry for that. He does hold the sword in his hand, and I guess technically, if you want to, you can also spin the figure around to the back and somewhat holster it on the back of his strap, though a lot of times doing it, you're just going to pop that peg out. That's the last time I promise I'm going to do that in this review. So it comes included with that, and that's making up the majority of his accessories. Well, that makes up all of his accessories. That being said, let's get a closer look at Faker. I don't know why whenever I'm thinking of Faker, I always feel like I want to add an OR, make it Fakor instead of Faker. Thank goodness, and it's pretty early into this review to be already claiming this. Hopefully I'm just going to say Faker for the rest of this and not call him in slip. Call him Fakor by mistake. One thing you will see about the figure, and involving this, I would have to then move this guy over and just bring in the He-Man once again. It's pretty much using the exact same bodies. If you are going to have yourself an imposter He-Man, you would hope at the very least that they would use the exact same body, and they do. The coloring, of course, is different between the two. Smurf blue for the Faker. See, I knew I jinxed myself by saying that. And of course, your regular skin tone for He-Man. Things also that have been changed on Faker is the fact that he does have Skeletor's top armor piece that makes up his torso. Now, of course, on the back here, you can detach this. It's already done it already for me. And short of me actually removing these, because these are always something that, if you're not careful, can start developing stress marks. But I think it's loose enough that I can easily slide this up, just to show you that, yes, he does have the little armor, or the little android. It kind of looks like an old spinning tape reel, those audio reels you would see in detective shows of the 70s and even 80s, I guess, really. So it's nice to see that he's got that. Even if you've got the torso armor down, you still see it peeking out from either side. So again, I asked the question, short of him shape-shifting, which I didn't realize he could actually do, change the skin color to a more average, acceptable, well, this color, certainly, if he wants to be blending in as He-Man. But apparently it also changes out his armor piece as well, because if you're looking at the front of the comic, he clearly has He-Man's armor. I mean, I could see if he's got still this armor, people would be like, hey, wait a minute, why is He-Man walking around with Skeletor's gear? Anyways, let's talk about the biggest problem I have with this figure. And again, in order to do this, I'm going to just move this guy over. I keep seeming to bring this guy back in. Let's compare him with the Origins He-Man, which, as you remember, of course, had a brand new head sculpt introduced to this line. A line, well, this head sculpt for the line is not something that was loved by everybody. I didn't really like this head sculpt myself. But I would say, if you're continuing the trend, and if you're creating yourself a faker that's supposed to be an imposter He-Man, why wouldn't they then use this head sculpt and just simply color it blue with red hair instead? What they've done instead is they've produced a faker that has a classic He-Man head sculpt. Now this is fine when we do get the reissue. It's even fine that if you did pick yourself up the Battle Armor He-Man and decide for yourself you want to use the classic head sculpt and pop that off, the existing He-Man, which again I'm bringing back into the camera, if you want to pop this one off and replace it with that classic style head sculpt, then yeah, sure. You've got yourself a pretty close proximity, other than, of course, the blue skin and things I mentioned already. But I think in a case like this, why wouldn't they have packaged this guy as a deluxe figure with the alternate head sculpt, giving you two different head portraits? Now, some people would be fine for the idea that he gets himself a classic head sculpt, but I would cry foul. I'd say, wait a minute. You had me invest in an Origins He-Man head sculpt, which I didn't like in the beginning, but I have warmed up to the head sculpt. Why wouldn't you have then given us one other one? So it would be closer to this head sculpt right here. Now, I don't know if down the road, perhaps, we're going to be getting ourselves another faker. Seems pretty odd that we would. That maybe would come with a second head portrait. Similar to when we had a look at Ninjor. Still, I ask the question, figures like that should have been released as the deluxe sets with 2 head sculpts. Figures like Ram Man, I don't think should have ever been released as a deluxe figure. Anyways. As for the rest of the figure, for what he is, he does have very traditional looking faker qualities. The blue skin, of course. He's got the darker fur loincloth down below, done in purple. Paint on this guy is actually pretty good. You got the nice shiny black there on the belt, and equally shiny amount of black on also the gauntlets. Unfortunately, they're not completely painted. There are a few little unfinished areas on the end of it. But overall, like, it's a good-looking figure. My biggest issue is all the things I was just whining about. I know, why would you be whining so much about this? But it's a valid point, really. It's fine for people that are swapping out the head sculpts. But let's leave a little bit still love for people that were invested in that Origin head sculpt in the first place. Give us the alternate head sculpt for this guy as well. Don't just surrender and say, hey, wait a minute, let's release him with a more classic head sculpt because that's what everybody wanted in the first place. Let's have a look at the articulation here on Faker. His head rotates all the way around, the same as, of course, all He-Man figures. Head moves up and down, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. The arms hinge out. They're simply on a peg hinge joint there. You can also move the arm back and forth like this. He has a hinge in the elbow, which also allows the forearm to rotate all the way around. And he also has hand articulation as well. Rotate that all the way around and hinging it also back and forth. Standard waist swivels on all these figures. The legs then split out if you want to. Ball pegs on the inside. You can move the legs forward and back. Bends at the knee. Rotates the lower leg. Rotates somewhat of a loose boot. Very, very loose, at least on this side. This side's not as bad. This side's a little bit looser. Feet, of course, move back and forth, and you can also ankle pivot them as well. And yes, in fact, they do have peg-holes on the undersides of their feet. In closing, short before we actually get to final looks of the figure, and again, I'll bring He-Man back into the frame. I was excited that we were going to be getting a faker. Unfortunately, though, even advertised, it seemed on the back of the packaging, they went with a more longer hairstyle. So I would have thought that they would have released this guy with the Origins head, because of course that's what we invested in when we got this He-Man in the first place. We didn't like this head sculpt, but I have grown I don't want to say love, but I've grown a bit of more of a like to the head sculpt than I had before. But again, if you're going to have Faker posing as He-Man, it's really difficult to have him posing as a character when you decide that you don't want to release the figure with the same head sculpt, well, not quite the same head sculpt, with the blue tinted head sculpt to a version of figure that we already had earlier in this line. Faker's a fine enough figure, I guess, and a close enough imposter to He-Man. Mind you, it's more successful if you're currently displaying your Origins He-Man with the classic head that came packed with the Battle Armor He-Man. You'll remember when we had a look at Battle Armor He-Man and Battle Armor Skeletor, Mattel packed 2 head sculpts with both those figures. One of them was more closer to the Origins, what we were getting now with heads, and then the other one was more akin to like the vintage line. So of course, if you are displaying your He-Man currently with that head, then yes, Faker's a little bit closer to being the better imposter. If you didn't pick up the Battle Armor He-Man or Skeletor, don't worry. Mattel is re-releasing the He-Man and the Skeletor, those original ones that you'll see at the back of the packaging at the top corners. Re-releasing those figures with those classic heads. Yeah, you know, if you already picked up both the Battle Armor versions of either one of those characters, you already have the heads. So really the only sell of either one of those figures is that they're going to come with double-sided swords, which was the thing I really hoped the figures could have come included with in the first place. So let's go with the theory that you're displaying your He-Man, Origins He-Man right now with that classic head. Then yes, figure does a fine enough job of being an imposter to that figure. But those still invested in the original Origins line heads, like myself included, I'm now actually liking the Origins head on He-Man. And I'm now sort of feeling like I'm left in the dust, because instead of releasing Faker as a deluxe figure, where maybe they could have thrown in extra accessories, or at the very least, an alternate head sculpt that was closer to being the Origins head. Because at least then, you could have chosen for yourself to display Faker with either the Origins head, or the more classic looking head. And they didn't do that. Instead, they only gave us just the classic head. So he even stands out even more like a sore thumb. I mean, overlooking the fact that, yes, he's got blue skin and he's got orange armor, he stands out even worse because now he doesn't even have the same head as Origins He-Man. Does that mean that down the road we may get ourselves... I guess they could rectify this by just releasing a battle armor Faker, which I don't think we ever really got a battle armor Faker, but at least make that happen, Mattel, so that those who wanted to display their Faker, myself included, I'm putting up my hand right now, to display it with the Origins head, then yeah, I can do that. Because unfortunately, I don't mind a vintage head sculpt, but it doesn't look at all like He-Man. Of course, overlooking the blue skin and overlooking the orange armor. What do you guys think of Faker? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you guys are also new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. As a little bit alluded to in this review, we are going to be looking at the other figures listed on the back of the packaging, minus the He-Man and minus the Skeletor, because we've already had a look at those before. And I'm jokingly saying I'm never going to be picking up those reissues. Who am I kidding? I'm just going to pick them up anyways, just for the double-sided sword, because I do that. I do silly things like that. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. Of course, we are going to be looking at more Master Universe, but there's going to definitely be a lot more stuff as well. So keep your Eternian peepers peeled to this channel. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.